Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CAF News. My name is Kevin Donovan. I'm speaking as usual with my friend Brice, and this is a slightly different episode, I would say. It's not exactly a future trends episode, more of kind of a systems episode. We see a movement from digital transformation to digital momentum, where disruption isn't episodic anymore. It's more continuous, overlapping, self-reinforcing. What if the next disruption event doesn't arrive as a single event? What are you thinking, Brice? How you doing, by the way?
Doing great, and I think you nailed like the overview. And really, this started when I was looking at Walt Paul's book on Quantum Ready and trying to understand what it really means when we go to the quantum day. What's that shift really going to be like? And that's just looking at one paradigm that we're shifting. What became really clear in reading the book, and it really applies to things more broadly, and that's what we'll be talking about today, is this idea that the shift won't be like yesterday you weren't quantum ready and then tomorrow you are. It's a more gradual shift, and it's not, as we look forward to the future, there's things that are inevitable that are going to be happening all at once, and we need to deal with that. And that's really what this image is about. What are some of these events that are going to be occurring in the near future that are going to be upon us? They're not going to be really crisp, and how do we deal with them?
Yeah, right. That's how it struck me, that if all of these things start happening at once and feeding into each other, quantum breaking encryption and thereby trust, AI agents reshaping work, synthetic content distorting reality, energy prices, even, rewriting infrastructure and strategy. Organizations are still trying to respond with annual planning cycles and review boards and static roadmaps and architectures. That is a world we may be leaving behind.
Definitely, and this is it's a white space. That's here's some high probability events that we're looking at, but there's a lot more. And I think the important thing for us to realize as we see this, twofold. One, there's a convergence that's happening. So if we use quantum day as an example, we all know that the asymmetric encryption algorithms are going to be outdated once we have a quantum computer. As we were talking the other day, Kevin, we've already seen examples where Shor's algorithm can break that encryption, maybe not for 256 bits yet, but for smaller segments.
Yeah.
And we're going to see, definitely that's a part of it, right? Like you're going to have to meet that minimal bar. At some point, you're going to have to deal with some of the newer encryption algorithms that are going to be in place, like MLChem and stuff like this, that go from factoring as the algorithm to understanding vector spaces. So that's one element. But the other element is it's not going to happen all at once. So when you look at quantum day, one thing that I became aware of is that there's people harvesting data right now that's encrypted with the anticipation that when quantum comes, they can break the encryption. So the hack is happening now, and some people have already been hacked. They just don't know it yet. And then and the second thing is the quantum computer. Well, it's not going to become available to everybody overnight. It's going to happen in phases, and the way we deal with these algorithms is going to change. And the third point is those algorithms that we're looking at to provide immediate relief. Well, they may have mathematical insights that change them also. So we may be looking right now at MLChem. We say, oh, what a great algorithm! It's secure. Trying to compute the space to a vector in this multidimensional space is really tough. Guess what? Somebody may find a way to look at it that bounds the problem and makes it much easier to look at. And we need to be prepared because these kind of innovations are going to happen as we move forward. So there's the first part is this convergence towards here is business as usual. You need a standard solution. But the other part is everybody's going to treat this differently. The adoption of practically of what this means in terms of encryption, asymmetric encryption, digital signatures, in the case of quantum day, is going to result in different approaches. And that's going to provide strategic advantage. And I think when we look at these events, this is where the opportunity is how do you differentiate yourself strategically? And I'm just going to do a quick run through of what these events are, not to go into detail, but really I think this is a huge opportunity, Kevin, going forward for companies that recognize this and are able to strategically align with these changes in a way that puts them in these ecosystems in a good light.
Yeah, we should let people know that this actually came from a LinkedIn post that you put up after you had been looking at this Quantum Day event, which is where quantum computers can break cryptographic protocols. And all of a sudden, yeah, if you have the public key to somebody's Bitcoin wallet, now you can figure out the private key, and that Bitcoin is now yours. But it's interesting. This circle behind you is not about that in isolation, but is more that Q Day, as it's called, is going to be just one of several kind of days, and it's about not predicting one big day, but preparing for a world where every day can become an X day, as you call it. So let take us through the highlights. What's on your calendar of days there in that landscape?
Yeah, so this is a look at some initial white space. So the second one is, we've given them letters just to make it easier to remember. The second one is A Day, and this is when we finally see a shift towards an agentic economy. Right now, when we look at supply chains and ecosystems, humans dominate the loop pretty much. And that's going to shift as we go forward to more agentic systems that are going to make decisions. And what does that mean? How do we actually deal with those ecosystems that become more operational? The second one, synthetic reality destabilization, or S-Day. We're seeing this all over right now. When I look at a piece of information, is it legitimate? I was just looking at some posts from different people on the Iran conflict. And, the stuff that Iran puts out is a lot different than the stuff the United States puts out. Which one is authentic? Well, we can probably...
The one that's on Truth Social. That's the true
one. That's absolutely, yes.
Okay, just so we're clear.
And that's the whole point, is what do you take as being valid? Is it Truth Social? Is it Fox News? Or is it Al Jazeera and Iran? And we have our preferences, but at some point, companies, I think it's going to be so hard to distinguish artificial reality from synthetic reality. We're going to be looking for provenance or guaranteed lineage of our images, or perhaps some way to understand them. So this is going to create a convergence as well as an opportunity. A third or a fourth day would be Biological and Synthetic Biology Day. As these systems become more available and open source, individuals can now do things in their home that they could never do before, and they can leverage the power of AI to do that. And what does it mean when, as a biohacker, somebody can do something they don't have to wait for a clinical trial? How do we deal with that? And I think there's some huge issues there that we really need to start coming to grips with. Cognitive Coupling Day. This is the idea that we're using desktop tools to enhance our cognition. We're using things on the desktop now. We're talking to AIs. We're leveraging ontologies to search things. And these chat robots are giving us results, that we could never have imagined, but they're becoming part of how I interact with my environment. They're becoming part of the immersive environment. What is that going to mean culturally as that shift occurs? And I start to use it. And I don't think it's something to be afraid of. We just need to be aware of it. It's going to result in some pretty massive changes when the ambient AI, naturally bolsters what we do. And, it raises questions when that day occurs. Is it going to be just chats, or are we going to see something very much like Cyborg Nest, where I can have implants that even help as I go forward, or the Elon Musk neurochip? What does that really mean going forward? And when does it become, I'm willing to accept that. You already talked to the sixth one, which is E-Day, the energy displacement. We're seeing immediate trends to these small modular nuclear reactors in data centers. That's on the table right now, not science fiction. But what happens when hydrogen becomes freely available? Maybe it solves all our problems, but guess what? That's 10 or 20 years away. How does that transition look? How do companies deal with it?
Yeah.
Recursive labor recomposition as roles get displaced by AI. So I don't think we're going to see people necessarily, shunted out of roles immediately, but a gradual displacement as they use more AI.
And why recursive there? I like labor recomposition.
Well, because I might have an AI that uses me, and I might in turn use an AI. So the supervisor role becomes completely recursive, right?
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
The agent may be looking for something that I may be, and who serves who becomes a muddy line right now in that day.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so it's interesting. There seems to be different clusters of these days that you're looking at. There's like trust disruption around Q day itself, the synthetic reality. There seems to be like work economy, agentic economy shifts and the labor, and maybe that's even the cognitive coupling if we're using our brains at work. Architecture, governance, then there was something around a governance and ontology fragmentation, knowledge, different pieces, and then
absolutely.
physical world.
Yeah, so we got ontology fragmentation and this idea that we have, on ecosystems, individual companies or ecosystems are using different terminology, then it collides. At some point, we're going to work through that by having common ontologies, but what's it like on the way there? Trust. We've already seen this in politics, tribalization, and I think it's going to go beyond politics towards brand recognition based on that trust. And does that, and to your earlier point, these things interact with each other. Like a company that establishes quantum, Q-Day very well is going to probably have a higher level of trust than somebody who is an open door because they haven't adopted it quick enough. Right. And then we move to things like governance as code. A little bit further off, at what point do we actually give these agents some autonomy or rights, or recognize how to deal with the damages that they cause? Like right now, we haven't talked about, an autonomous vehicle. What if it crashes? Who do I blame? Who's responsible? And finally, our level of knowledge, the acceleration they talk about, guys like Ray Kurzweil will talk about moving to the singularity. Well, as we get to that point and we're using these AIs, this rate of knowledge expansion is exploding. How do we deal with that? And there's a point where we have to recognize that we need different strategies to govern that and understand it and monitor it. And so we've listed 12 things, and the real point that you point and that we come to is that they don't all happen in isolation. It's not like, oh, I got through Q Day, hooray, I'm good. There's at least 12 things happening. There's probably a lot more if we sat down and thought about it. And to be ready, I think companies need to understand what's the bar that they need to survive as these things move forward, and what is the opportunity that they need to differentiate themselves.
Yeah, that does kind of lead the eye toward the center. I think there's a book out called Digital Momentum, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, and absolutely, this is what the book is about, is how to actually understand change in terms of resilience, and what do you need to do to deal with it, to become resilient. And the idea that, guess what, I'm not going to be able, even though I've got 12 items down here right now, in 2 years, if we revisit this discussion, it's going to change. That's the one thing that's certain.
The items in the ring will change, but the ring will persist. And the core will likely also continue to be the response. Correct?
Well, and this is the thing we can't look at, in the past, oh, there's a new technology cloud. Let's just reboot and redo our company and take 2 years to do it. Guess what? If you do that now, you're not going to survive. There's too much change. You need to architecturally change the way we look at things to deal with this change and to be resilient and to do this incrementally. And the companies that do that, I think, are going to have a real strategic advantage.
So if this disruption landscape is the challenge we find ourselves facing over time, what is the response? Like, what does digital momentum suggest? What do you think is the enterprise's, what sort of capabilities do we have or do we need to develop?
Well, I think we need to build an architecture that can adopt to a future white space that anticipates what some of those changes are. So in other words, it becomes plug and play, recognizing that new technologies will come in. We need to leverage intelligence when we build out our integrations and compose them appropriately, right? One of the common questions that I've seen that comes up is where should I put AI? Let's look at a simple decision. Where do I put AI? Should it be part of my packages? Like, should I let the vendor embed it, or should I have a separate AI function? And questions like that really need to be answered up front in your overall enterprise architecture. And I think splitting them, like being composable and recognizing that things might change, creates a huge amount of adaptability. Look at Quantum Day. If I'm able to pull out that, the current factoring algorithms, and say, for encryption, and I take RSA and I can replace it with ML-Chem very smoothly, which is the newer approach, which is quantum proof, I'm going to have a huge advantage if that change is less painless. And we need to do that with a whole bunch of stuff. We basically need to build composable architectures. We need to think about what is important in each of the systems that we build. And I think we also need to think about our future systems that are going to come a little bit and how they're going to integrate with this world so that they can do that smoothly, even if they have new capabilities.
Interesting. So static architectures become a liability, not
Totally.
that they're wrong, but they're too slow to be right enough. And we need to look at it much more, of course, not as documentation or governance theater or even technology standards or anything. It needs to be organizational adaptability, the ability to sense, decide, adapt, recompose faster than everything around you in that ring.
Absolutely. And there's two components to that. One is dynamically, how do I mature my organization to respond quicker? And there's different levels of maturity. And what we're looking at is, like, take governance. I can't wait to go to the board and sit down and wait 3 months to make a decision that's going to impact maybe an individual transaction. I need to put guardrails up now, empower my system to make some decisions within those guardrails, and then let it do things. Yet at the same time, I need to have an adaptive architecture itself that's also going to be open to change as I go forward. So there's really two components in the architecture that we need to look at.
It's always been a bit of a mirage, but is there such a thing as a right target state?
Wow, that's
anymore?
I would reword the question: is there such a thing as a static target state? So, with strategy, a lot of times we're looking at what's my next strategic state that I want to get to. And I think a better way to look at it is more like a boxing match now. Strategy happens much quicker. And if I punch to where my target is, I'm probably going to miss it every time. I need to recognize that strategy is a moving target. And we talk about concepts like strategic invariance in the book, which is the idea of understanding that my targets are moving, but I can guess where they're going to go. So if I am going to engage in a 6-month project, 6 months is long enough that things are going to change. I need to guess what outcomes I'm going to need in 6 months, not what outcomes are good for today. So I need to lead the target, just like in a boxing match.
Yeah. I like that analogy, skating where the puck is going. It does kind of beg the question then, can we continually adjust and still be coherent as an organization? Do we?
I think so.
Governance, it's got to move from review boards to runtimes?
Absolutely. And I think the answer is that none of these changes are occurring as random outputs that we can't predict. They're trajectories that we can track. We can get in front of them and think that way. And you talk about governance, like we know it's going to become more dynamic. Let's get in front of it. We can make changes today about how our boards are working, and they provide guardrails, and then how we implement those guardrails more dynamically, rather than having, minutiae coming to the, governing small details. So part of this is understanding what we need to push to the endpoints in our organization to empower decision making. And at the same time, what do we need to control? What ethics are important for us to manage with our central governance capabilities? And we see the trajectory. Let's get on board. Let's do it. And each of these things details more of a trajectory that we're following, right? And each of these follows, I think, from broader trends that society's following, that we can, in fact, latch onto those trajectories and make much better guesses of where we're going, rather than doing a digital transformation that takes 2 years, coming out of the box and finding you missed all your outcomes. And yeah, maybe you've tracked some project metrics, but if you're not monitoring your minimum viable product, the features that change, and how they're providing outcomes, literally monthly or even daily in some cases, you're just going to miss the boat, because things are going to change around you.
Yeah, interesting. So the architect is the steward of kind of this adaptive coherence.
Yeah. I think the architect changes their role from being a static, here's my architecture that doesn't change, to one where he needs to work a lot closer with the C-suite to understand strategy, to value alignment, and where you're going with the technology, but also executing that, where there's going to be changes that happen much quicker. So the architect becomes embedded into your development pipeline, and they have it becomes much more fluid for them to help with that decision making, and also help the C-suite understand some of those dynamic policy changes.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, so what enterprises need to do, and what we need to do as architects, it's not predicting, it's not following or even trying to, you can't necessarily even keep pace with, but you just need to be adapting and sensing change early.
I think there's some level of prediction that we can look at. I can look at a trajectory and go, where is the technology going to take us here? And I think with some very major trends, we need to look at where we're at. Is our company agile enough to handle the changes in those areas? Are we presenting our ideas in a way that we can see where we're going? I think that is important. So I think there's a strategy discussion that has to occur. The strategy isn't like, oh, there's going to be a random change, we didn't see that coming. No, we're going to see things coming if you think a bit, do a little bit of future casting. And then the next part to that, though, is to be dynamic, to recognize that strategy has a dynamic component, and you're not the only player. When I release a product into the ecosystem, you're a part of that, but there's a whole ecosystem making decisions, and I need to be aware of what's happening and looking at these trajectories and going, okay, now I need to modify them. And what's that right level of granularity? I think the winners are going to get to answer that question and nail it. They're going to understand how quick those changes need to be adapted to, and how they're going to adapt, and they're going to lead these ecosystems. And we're seeing some of this already. I mean, we're seeing this with companies like NVIDIA. Where are they really competing? Well, they're not competing with chip design. They're competing with their CUDA operating system. They're competing across the whole ecosystem, and they're recognizing shifts very quickly. I mean, they recently had their own Quantum Day event where here's how AI can support quantum computing and work together. And they recognized the trajectory that they needed to get on board with, and they responded. And that's all we're talking about. It's not like we're going into a world of voodoo where everything happens at random. It's still pretty predictable, but the old methods, the old business models need to be enhanced now.
Interesting. So that's kind of the architectural challenge in digital momentum. It's not any longer any kind of a perfect future state, just building and enabling an enterprise that can keep evolving safely, intelligently, and maybe just ahead of the speed of disruption.
ahead of the speed of disruption and understanding your role in the ecosystem. And for some companies, there's a discussion that, we can follow up at some point, but that it's how do I change my role in the ecosystem? And we've seen this happen, right? You've got companies that are like IBM that rule the desktop computer world. And then Microsoft recognized the importance of the operating system, and all of a sudden, the ecosystem just shifted. And there will be companies that do that understand those levers and use them to their strategic advantage.
Yeah, interesting. And especially it seems maybe we need to be helping organizations move from digital transformation as some sort of a program or project more to this adaptation as a permanent capability. That is maybe the most important thing that you can do and keep doing and be good at.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point to conclude on. It's really building this meta capability to be agile and resilient that underlines it underlies the way you start to look at things and go from a very rigid bricks and mortar kind of here's my capabilities that rigidly do something to understand that they are going to change. And there's a lot to be said to that. Business models are still going to work. We're still going to need to take money from clients. We're just going to envision new ways of doing it and quicker ways of doing it.
Yeah. Great stuff. Great thinking. Thanks for the post. Thanks for the book. Thanks for the talk. And everybody out there, if you're experiencing this, you take a look at the wheel. There's probably different days. Give them your own letters and names. Let's talk through these challenges and how we think that we can meet them as architects and help enterprises we work with address them.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, for talking about this, and we look forward to your comments below. Post, let's get a dialogue going. Let's understand this white space. Thanks again, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.